There we go. Okay, so welcome to the Convert to Raid Hunter Boot Camp. I'm Firestar. I play Blazestar, a Pandaren Hunter in Convert to Raid Mobus. Just really quick, I've been playing my Hunter on and off ever since I started WoW, and it's always been one of my favorite characters to play, even when it wasn't my main. So, that's because it's one of the most unique classes in the game. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So tonight we're going to be discussing the Marksmanship and Survival specializations. I know a lot of people out there really like Beast Mastery, but unfortunately I am not one of those people. I do not enjoy Beast Mastery at all, really. And I have never really played it in a progression raid setting. So I have very little experience. I couldn't really tell you anything about the class or the spec that you couldn't find on Icy Veins or MMO Champion or anything like that. But I have played Marksmanship and Survival quite a bit. So I'm hopefully going to be able to help you up your game just that little bit. We're going to go over all the basics today. The rotation, your gymming, enchanting, your statistics, all that good stuff. And I'm also hopefully going to give you some pro tips that might help you up your DPS beyond what you could get from just a normal guide. So we're going to start off with the Marksmanship specialization. Now, Marksmanship is the most popular spec for hunters right now. It is the top DPS spec. This week we actually did receive a nerf to Marksmanship. 10% off of aim shot and 10% off of kill shot. This is actually not as big as a lot of people seem to think. It's about a 5% nerf when you look at the numbers overall. Even so, it does hurt, and it did knock us down several places. But we are still perfectly viable. We are still perfectly competitive. We're just not top dog anymore. So, with Marksmanship, you're going to have just a few basic abilities. 6, really, that you have besides talents. And those 6 are going to be your Explosive Trap, your Multi-Shot, Chimera Shot, Aim Shot, Kill Shot, and Steady Shot. And we're going to talk about all of those in detail here right now. So your Chimera Shot, that is your big ability. That is the one that you want to keep on cooldown. I'm mousing over it on this Twitch stream right now. It costs 35 focus. It has a 9-second cooldown. And it hits like a truck. It says that it deals, mine says 31,000 nature or frost damage. The thing to remember about Chimera Shot that's changed since Mists of Pandaria is that it is now a cleave ability. It fires 2 shots if there are 2 targets, and one will hit each. So it is a very, very nice ability to use whenever you are doing any kind of cleave. Next ability is going to be your Aim Shot. This costs 50 focus, and it is a 2.5 second cast time without any haste. Mine is a bit lower because I have some haste. And mine deals about 30,000 physical damage. Castable while moving. Everything you do as a hunter is castable while moving. Besides one ability, which we'll get to later. Aim Shot is going to be your focus stump. You can see that we all have our resource is focus. Marksman Hunters start off with 120 focus at level 100, and Aim Shot costs 50 focus. There are several abilities, passives, and talents that will actually help you reduce that focus cost, however, and again, we'll get to all of that later. Multi-Shot. This is going to be your main AoE ability. It costs 40 focus, and basically, it hits the target that you are targeting and any other targets that are within a cone around that target. Very powerful ability if used properly. Well, not so much anymore these days. But if you have a lot of targets up, you will find a DPS increase by using Multi-Shot over Aim Shot. Now, our execute ability is Kill Shot. Instant, no focus, 10-second cooldown. And it deals 53,000 physical damage, but it's only usable on targets that are below 35% health. If the target dies, you heal for 15% of your max health. And if it doesn't die, then it resets the cooldown, but that can only happen once every 6 seconds. So it's a very powerful ability. It's another one of those shots that once we're able to use it, we'll want to use it on cooldown. So far we've talked about several abilities that use up focus. And hunters, kind of like rogues, we regenerate focus naturally over time. But we don't regenerate nearly enough focus to be able to sustain our DPS. That's why we have our final ability, Steady Shot. Now, Steady Shot is another cast time. It's about 2 seconds base. Mine is a little lower, again, because of haste. It deals a small amount of physical damage, not nearly as much as any of your other shots. It is a very weak shot, but it generates 14 focus. This is going to be one of your 2 filler spells, the other one being Aimed Shot. Steady Shot is what you're going to be using to regen your focus. It's going to be a core part of your rotation. And the final ability that's going to always be in your rotation is Explosive Trap. With Trap Launcher, you can launch it to anywhere within range. And this changed, actually, from Mists of Pandaria. In Mists of Pandaria, it would explode and create a void zone. Now, whenever it is triggered, whenever an enemy runs across it, it and any enemies within 10 yards are afflicted with a fire damage over time spell. So it basically changed the ways in which we can use it. Instead of creating void zone, we put a dot on the target. Sometimes more useful, sometimes not. You gotta take it in stride. And this is basically going to be another part of your cleave and AoE DPS. It's not for single target, thankfully. Now, I'd like to get into talents a little bit. Talents are very important for hunters. This is where we're going to get a lot of our playstyle. Your playstyle will be very much affected by your talent choices. So your first tier of talents, this is going to be your movement talents, mostly going to affect your disengage. On the far left you will see Post Haste. This makes your disengage also free you from any movement impairing effects like roots or snares or any kind of slows. And it also increases your movement speed by 60%. This is really good for if you need to disengage and move across the field really quickly. Your second one, in the middle, is Narrow Escape. It also activates a web trap, which snares all of your targets, or roots them, rather. Roots all of your targets within 8 yards for 8 seconds. So when you disengage, anyone around you will be rooted. This is mostly a PvP talent, although there are some situations in which it could be useful. I'm having trouble thinking of any in the Heimall raid right now, but there are some situations in which it could be useful. I'm thinking Bethtalak and Firelands. This talent would have been amazingly useful on the Spiderlings. Now your final talent is going to be Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera. This reduces the cooldown of your disengage by 10 seconds, and also reduces the cooldown of your deterrence by 60 seconds. Now deterrence, this is it has 2 charges, and it's a defensive cooldown. You deflect all attacks, so no direct attacks or spells are going to hit you. And you also take 30% less damage for 5 seconds, but you also can't attack. So it's one of those abilities that you pop when you're about to die. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera allows you to do that more often. And it also allows you to disengage more often, which disengage, I probably should have mentioned, it's that leap backwards that I just did. And it's another one of those really useful hunter mobility talents. My personal preference is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera, but again, any of these 3, it's not really going to affect your DPS. Just take whichever one the fight requires. If you need to snare a bunch of ads, Narrow Escape. If you need to move really, really quickly, Post Haste. Otherwise, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera. Now your level 30 talent. This is going to be your crowd control talent. The one on the far left, this is the one that I generally take in most situations. Binding Shot, 45-second cooldown. Can't talk today. It fires a magical projectile, which, where it lands, it will tether any enemies that are near it. I'm going to launch it at this training dummy. And you can see that one right there got tethered. Now, if this training dummy were to, for some reason, grow legs and start moving, and it were to walk away, if it got 10 yards away from the binding shot, it would be stunned for 5 seconds. So it's very useful for crowd controlling a bunch of ads on fights. Something like Kargath, maybe, stunning some of the ads there. Or any trash mobs in Heroic Dungeons, really. Now your middle talent is the Wyvern Sting. This used to be survival only back in Cataclysm. Now any hunter spec can take it. Stinging Shot incapacitates them for 30 seconds. Now the thing to note is that it is a 1.5 second cast, and it is a 45-second cooldown, but it's only a 30-second CC. So you can't chain the CC like you could with our other CC, which is Freezing Trap. So it's situational at best. Now our other talent is Intimidation. It's 1 minute cooldown, 3-second stun, but it requires your pet. And as we'll see later, the default Marksmanship build doesn't use a pet. We'll get to that later. But if you are using basically the default Marksmanship build, Intimidation is not going to be able to be used by you. So your choices are really between Wyvern Sting and Binding Shot. Now level 45, you're going to have your 3 survival talents. The one on the far left is Exhilaration, 2 minute cooldown, instantly heals you for 22% and your pet for 100% of its max health. It's an on-demand burst of healing. Very useful. It's almost like a second health stone. But it is a 2 minute cooldown. So you have to bear that in mind. The one that I generally roll with is Iron Hawk. It reduces all the damage that you take by 10%. It's just a flat passive damage reduction. And generally I find that reducing the damage you take is more useful than taking damage and then healing it back up. Now the one on the far right is Spirit Bond. While your pet is active, you and your pet regenerate 2% of your total health every 2 seconds. But again, like with the Intimidation talent before, it requires you to have a pet out. And again, Marksmanship really doesn't roll with a pet these days. So Spirit Bond again is not really usable. It's between Iron Hawk and Exhilaration, again, depending on what the fight is. Now, level 60 is where we start getting into our DPS talents, and these are the ones that really start to matter. These are the ones that are really going to affect your damage. The one on the left is Steady Focus. This used to be baked into Marksmanship. This used to be just a passive in Marksmanship. You had it, you couldn't get rid of it, and I'm really happy that it's gone because it was kind of irritating at times. Using Steady Shot twice in a row increases your focus regen by 50% for 10 seconds. Now, the caveat with this is that you have to use Steady Shot twice in a row every 10 seconds, which means that you have to have enough focus drained to use those 2 Steady Shots back to back, which sometimes doesn't happen, especially at the start of a fight or at the end of a fight, and your steady focus can drop off, and that's just a DPS loss. Now your middle talent is Dire Beast. 30-second cooldown. Summons a wild beast to attack your target for 15 seconds, and every time that beast deals damage, you get 2 focus. Unfortunately, this one is the weakest of the 3 in this talent tier for Marksmanship. It is not competitive with Steady Focus. Or our final choice, which is the one that I choose. It is the best choice to take in terms of Simcraft and in terms of just convenience. Thrill of the Hunt. For every 10 focus you spend on a focus costing attack, you have a 60% chance to trigger Thrill of the Hunt. Now, that can be a bit confusing. So let's say that you spend 50 focus on an attack. Let's say you cast just hard cast an aim shot. That's going to cost you 50 focus. You multiply, you divide the 50 by the 10 focus to get 5, and then you multiply that by the 6% chance. So every 50 focus you spend, you have a 30% chance to trigger Thrill of the Hunt. What is Thrill of the Hunt? It reduces the focus cost of your next 3 arcane shots, aim shots, or multi-shots by 20. Now this is massive, especially for AoE, and we'll get to why it's massive for AoE in a little bit. But it's massive, especially at the start of a fight, because you can essentially get free aimed shots at the start of a fight, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But Thrill of the Hunt is very convenient. It just makes it so much easier to use your filler spell aimed shot. It means that you have to use your steady shot less. It's just all around a great choice to take. Now the level 75 talent. This is actually pretty close. The one on the far left is a Murder of Crows. It's a 1 minute cooldown, 30 focus, and it basically puts a dot on your target. If the target dies while a Murder of Crows is on it, the cooldown is reset, and there's no internal cooldown on that effect. So you can use this on trash and just spam it basically on mobs that are dying, and you'll still have it up for the boss. Now the talent in the middle is Blink Strikes. Your pet's basic attack does 50% more damage and can now be used from 30 yards away and will instantly teleport them behind their target. Again, we're not rolling with a pet if you're using the default Marksmanship build, so that's useless. Finally, Stampede. 5-minute cooldown. Summons all your pets to fight your target for 20 seconds. The choice really for Marksmanship is between Stampede and a Murder of Crows. A Murder of Crows does sim out to be more damage, but Stampede is a lot burstier, so if you have a boss that takes increased damage for any period of time, or a time when you need to burst this target down now, Stampede is going to be winning over a Murder of Crows just because it has that burst potential. Level 90. Your 3 choices. Glaive Toss. 15-second cooldown, 15 focus. You throw your 2 glaives at your target, and they come back. And they deal damage to your target and anyone that's caught in the line between them. Power Shot is a 45-second cooldown, again 15 focus. And it deals a ton of physical damage to both your target and anyone between you and your target. And anyone that's hit is knocked back, which can be kind of useful on spellcasters who are casting something. And finally, Barrage. 60 focus, which is a lot higher than the 15 focus of the other 2. It's also channeled, and it has a 20-second cooldown. And it basically, you go ham on your target. I'll show it here on the stream. You just start shooting everything. Everything around you just gets riddled with bullets. Now, you got to be careful here, especially in your heroic dungeons, because the range on this thing is surprisingly large. I can't tell you how many times I have just face-pulled the pack right behind the one that we're killing, because Barrage went a lot further than I thought it was going to. So, what's the choice here? Power Shot, unfortunately, is not viable. It really has never been viable for any sort of PvE environment for any spec. So your 2 choices are between Glaive Toss and Barrage. On a single target, Glaive Toss will theoretically do a bit more damage. However, the nature of most fights in Warlords of Draenor, both in Heroic Dungeons and in the High Maul raid, and in the upcoming Blackrock Foundry raid, you won't have just a single target. You'll have more than one. You'll have adds. You'll have 2 bosses. And at any time that you have more than one target, Barrage instantly goes higher than Glaive Toss, by a landslide. So, I really default to Barrage, because it's only slightly less damage than Glaive Toss on a single target. If you really want to min-max, you can switch back and forth between Glaive Toss and Barrage, but if you just stick with Barrage, you're not really going to go too wrong. Now finally, the new stuff, the stuff that everybody was so excited about for the new expansion, the level 100 talents. On the far left, you have your exotic munitions, which allow you to modify your ranged weapon to use these exotic munitions. Incendiary ammo deals explosive damage to any target around your auto-shot target. So whenever your auto-shot hits, it'll also do AoE damage around the target that it hits. Poisoned ammo is basically a serpent sting, where it'll just deal nature damage to your target whenever you auto-shot it. And it's, at my gear level, that seems to stack up to about 1.5k damage every second. And then finally, your frozen ammo. It deals less damage, it still deals additional magical damage, frost damage, but it deals less than the poisoned ammo and the incendiary ammo, but it also snares a target, reduces their movement speed by 50%, and you can only have 1 up at a time. Your middle talent is going to be Focusing Shot. Now this will replace your Steady Shot. You cannot move while casting this. This is the one ability that hunters have that you cannot cast while moving. It deals a lot more physical damage than Steady Shot. This one deals close to 8,000. Steady Shot does 5,000. So it's a 3,000 difference. And it's also a longer cast time, but it generates 50 focus compared to Steady Shot's 14. And if you have the Steady Focus talent, using Focusing Shot at any time will activate Steady Focus. So there's a lot going on there. And it's not a bad talent. In fact, on a perfectly standstill patchwork fight, you don't move at all, and you're just hammering away on a training dummy. Focusing Shot does do slightly, very slightly more damage. However, our best talent in almost every situation besides the one that I just mentioned is going to be Lone Wolf. While you don't have a pet active, your damage dealt with auto shot, steady shot, aim shot, chimera shot, and kill shot is increased by 30%. So basically, all of our big abilities are buffed through the roof. And you're able to provide one of several beneficial effects to your party in raid. You can provide any raid buff that you want, except for the spell power. You can't provide the spell power buff because we're a hunter, we don't use spell power. Well, not anymore. Now, Lone Wolf is basically your default talent choice. You're really not going to spec out of this unless you're doing some sort of soloing content. It's the one that I roll around with all the time. And I know a lot of people really, really don't like running around without a pet. It feels really unnatural to them. Personally, I think it's fine. But if you just have to have your little fluffykins with you, you can always go to Focusing Shot. It is less damage. It is going to be, like, unless you're perfectly stood still the entire time, you are going to lose damage. But it is an option. So those are the talents that Marksmanship tends to take. I'm going to go over a bit of gymming and chanting and what kind of stats you're looking for. It's pretty simple. Marksmanship likes crit. We love critical strike. Critical strike out the wazoo. You can see right here I'm stacking the critical strike. I've got 27% at a 641 gear level, which is pretty high without a raid buff. That's our best secondary stat, but I should probably talk first about our best stat, bar none, is our weapon damage. You want a bow, crossbow, or gun that deals the most weapon damage, because all of our shots, they're all based off of a percentage of weapon damage. Like, I think aimed shot is like 640% weapon damage or something ridiculous like that. So, yeah, your best stat, bar none, is your ranged weapon damage. After that, it's going to be agility. So you're going to want mail gear that has agility. If it doesn't have agility on it, then you don't want it. And then it's going to be critical strike. It's going to be your best secondary stat. That's the one that you're going to want on basically every piece of gear. Now, unfortunately, I don't have it on every piece of gear, but I have it on most of it. So your stat after critical strike is multi-strike. Multi-strike after crit gives you the best DPS increase. And after multi-strike, it's pretty much even. Versatility, mastery, and haste all give you right about the same damage bonus. The difference between them is negligible. We're talking about a 2 DPS increase. Maybe. Now, I should probably talk about our mastery because it did change. Our mastery is something that the old Cataclysm survival hunters might remember. Sniper training. When you stand still for 3 seconds, you gain sniper training for 6 seconds, which increases your damage, shot range, and critical strike damage by percent. For mine, it's 5.25%. Now, you can see, if you're watching on the Twitch stream, you can see I have the sniper training buff on my character right now. I'm stood perfectly still. I have sniper training. If I move for even a split second, it gets replaced by another buff, which is also sniper training. But this one is timed. The one that you have when you're stood perfectly still is not timed. It's just up there all the time. But if you move, it starts counting down from 6 seconds. Now, if you stand still again, you also get another buff called Sniper Training Recently Moved. Now, the countdown Sniper Training does the exact same thing. Sniper Training Recently Moved is 3 seconds. If that reaches 0, then your Sniper Training buff goes back to being full. So it's basically telling you, hey, you have this buffer zone, this amount of time, to stand still for 3 seconds, or you're going to lose your sniper training. So you're basically going to be kind of a turret. You want to make sure that you are able to stand still long enough to keep your sniper training up as much as possible. And that is going to be part of mastering your hunter. Mastering your marksmanship hunter. It's going to be knowing how to move across the battlefield as quickly as possible to make sure that you're not going to end up on the floor, but also make sure that you're not going to lose your sniper training buff, because losing that buff, that's going to lose 5% of your damage, or at least 5% of my damage. Doesn't seem like much, but when you're doing 20,000 DPS, that's 1,000 damage per second, and that's a pretty significant chunk of damage. So, yeah, keeping your sniper training up, managing that buff, that's going to be a critical part of mastering your marksmanship hunter. When it comes to enchanting and gemming, there are no more primary stat enchants or gems out there. Instead, we're going to be gemming and enchanting straight crit. You can see on my cloak, I have my 100 critical strike. In my chest piece, I have a 35 critical strike gem. If it can be enchanted, you're going to enchant it with critical strike. If it has a gem socket, you're going to put in a critical strike gem. It's that simple. Any item enhancements, you want critical strike, because obviously that is our best secondary stat. So before I go into like managing some of the more advanced things about marksman hunters, does anyone have any questions in the Twitch chat or in the Mumble channel? I'm just gonna wait and see if anybody has anything in the Twitch chat. Doesn't look like anyone has anything, so I'm just going to move on with some of our more important passive abilities. And this is where you're really going to start mastering your hunter. I've always said that knowing your passive abilities, knowing how they affect all of your abilities, that is going to be what separates you, what differentiates the good from the great. So we're going to talk about a few of our passive abilities. So, the first one that is of any note is Bombardment. Your critical strikes with multi-shot cause your subsequent multi-shots to cost 25 less focus and cause 60% additional damage for 5 seconds. This is just a flat-up buff to any multi-shots that you do after your first one. So I'm going to do a multi-shot here and pray that one of them crits. It didn't. Come on. There we go, Bombardment. Now, the great thing about Bombardment is that it stacks very well with Thrill of the Hunt. Remember Thrill of the Hunt? Reduces your multi-shot or focus cost by 20. Combine that with Bombardment, and your multi-shots are free. Absolutely free. I'm going to see if I can't show this on the Twitch channel. I'm going to try and proc Thrill of the Hunt. It's not going. Yeah, that sometimes happens. But yeah, if you have your Thrill of the Hunt and you proc Bombardment from your multi-shots are going to be free. However, do note that because of that, you're not going to proc any other Thrill of the Hunts, because Thrill of the Hunt requires you to spend focus, and if your multi-shots are free, obviously you're not spending any focus. So you can't sustain that indefinitely. But it is a very nice thing to know. Now the next one, this is probably the singular most important talent or passive ability that you have. Careful Aim. This is essentially a reverse execute. You all have your execute abilities like Kill Shot or Warrior's Execute when the boss falls below a certain percentage of health. Careful Aim is the opposite of that. It enhances your damage while the boss is above a certain amount of health. So Careful Aim increases the critical strike chance of your steady shot, focusing shot, and aim shot by 60% on targets who are at above 80% health, or while rapid fire is active. This is massive. This is absolutely massive. Because while a boss is above 80% health, your aim shots, which already hit for 28,500 damage, are going to be critting. That's 55 to 60,000 damage every time essentially every time you use an aim shot, 9 times out of 10. And that's especially important when you combine it with our next passive, Enhanced Aim Shot. Aim Shot critical strikes grant you 20 focus. So whenever you are above 80% health, the boss is above 80% health, your aim shots are going to be critting almost every time. And they're going to be refunding you 20 focus. Enter Thrill of the Hunt. Our old friend again. This will also reduce the aim shot cost by 20. So, while Thrill of the Hunt is active, any aim shot that you do that crits will essentially only cost you 10 focus, and you will regenerate passively that amount of focus during the cast of that aim shot. So you are essentially getting free aim shots. Focus neutral aim shots. That is massive. And that really, really defines your opener. These two talents working together it's what makes the opener work. Now there are a couple of other passives that are a bit less important. Improve focus, increase your maximum focus by 20. That's why we have 120 focus instead of 100. Enhanced kill shot, it just increases the damage percent when we can use kill shot. Lethal shots, you gain 5% more of the critical strike stat from all sources, which is nice. And then finally, our passive raid buff that all hunters bring, True Shot Aura, 10% increased melee and ranged attack power. So those are all of our passive abilities. So as I said, those passive abilities, those two in particular, the Careful Aim and the Enhanced Aim Shot, they are going to be what really defines your opener. Now your opener, what you want to do, obviously you want to use your pre-pot. For those of you who don't know about pre-potting, that's just using your Draenic Agility Potion right before the pull. And that just buffs everything that you do. While your tank is pulling, you'll want to use your Misdirection on him. Now, Misdirection, I should probably mention what that is. Misdirect all threat to the target. So you'll hit that. And then while your tank is charging in, you want to be pre-casting an aim shot, so that within a half second of your tank pulling that boss, your aimed shot lands. So like, let's say, tanks now. And there we go. And crits. And that just starts your opener. So after that first aim shot, that first precast aim shot, you're going to want to instantly fire off your Chimera shot. You want to keep that on cooldown at all times because it hits like a Mack truck. So, precast aim shot, and then Chimera shot. Now hopefully, and this is where it kind of all falls to pieces, this is where the RNG really can hit you really hard. This is where hopefully your Thrill of the Hunt will have procced, because you'll have used 50 focus, and then 35 focus. You'll have used 85 focus. Now that's about a 50% chance, a little bit less than a 50% chance to proc Thrill of the Hunt. No, it's a little bit more. My math is off. Anyway, it's close to a 50% chance to proc Thrill of the Hunt. Now if that does, then you're golden. You can start turreting away with your aim shots. Now at this point, you might have a Bloodlust active, or, a Heroism, or if we're hunters, Ancient Hysteria active. At this time, you should also probably pop your Rapid Fire, which just increases your haste. But that also gives you your Careful Aim passive. Although that won't stack again with the boss being above 80% health. It just gives you your faster aim shots. So you'll precast your aim shot, fire off your Chimera shot, and then hopefully your Thrill of the Hunt will have procced, and you can just start turreting aim shots into that thing, which will just keep critting. You'll just be focus neutral, essentially, until your Thrill of the Hunt wears off, or until you need to Chimera shot again. And during your opener, all you're going to be doing on a single target is aim shot and Chimera shot. Or if you need to regen your focus, like let's say your Thrill of the Hunt falls off, or it just doesn't proc in the first place, your steady shot. But you're not going to touch any other abilities. You're not going to touch your Barrage or Glaive Toss. You're not going to touch your Stampede or your Murder Crows or your multi-shot on a single target. You're just going to be hitting those three abilities: aim shot, Chimera shot, and steady shot. Now once the boss falls below 80% health, that Careful Aim passive will not be in effect anymore, and you can just go into your standard rotation. Now your standard rotation is this. First of all, you always have to keep your Chimera shot on cooldown. I cannot stress this enough. Chimera shot is your hardest hitting ability besides your execute ability, which is kill shot. It is a 9-second cooldown. It costs 35 focus. This needs to be on cooldown at all times. If it is off cooldown for even an instant, that is a massive DPS loss. Because let's say that you have it up for... Let's say you have it off cooldown for a second every single time. So you use it every 10 seconds instead of every 9 seconds. On a... let's say a 90-second fight, which is absurdly short, but you're going to lose a Chimera shot on a 90-second fight because you've wasted so much time spread out of your Chimera shot being off cooldown. You'd never want to lose a use of your Chimera shot because it hits like a freight train. Now your next ability after your Chimera shot is going to be your kill shot when it's usable. So remember that your kill shot, if it doesn't kill the target, will reset its cooldown. So Chimera Shot, Kill Shot. Then it's going to be either your Barrage or your Glaive Toss, depending on which one you took. That's going to be your next after your Kill Shot. And then it's going to be a Murder of Crows or Stampede, again, depending on your talent choice. Now, if all of those are on cooldown, your filler spells are going to be Aim Shot and Steady Shot. And that's the rotation right there for single target. Chimera Shot, Kill Shot, Barrage or Glaive Toss, Murder of Crows or Stampede, and then just filling in with Steady Shot and Aim Shot. That's your basic rotation. Now, on anywhere between 2 and 6 targets, your rotation remains exactly the same, with one exception. If there are between 2 and 6 targets, you are going to be throwing in your Explosive Trap as well, assuming that all those targets will get the full benefit of that Explosive Trap. You'll also want to aim your Chimera Shot. Remember, your Chimera Shot cleaves. You want to aim it so that your Chimera Shot cleaves. So target a mob that is really close to another one, and hit your Chimera Shot, and it'll fire both of its procs. And that'll just essentially double your Chimera Shot damage. It's free damage. And then also throw in your Explosive Trap. Now, once you get into your mass AoE, your rotation again remains the same, because Marksman mass AoE really isn't that good. The only difference will be that instead of Aim Shot Filler, you will use Multi-Shot Filler. That is the only difference that will happen once you get above 6 targets. 7 or more, it's your single target rotation with Multi-Shot instead of Aim Shot. Marksman AoE is not that great. It really isn't, unfortunately. Barrage helps, but it doesn't help enough. So, we're almost done with Marksmanship, really. There's only a few more things that I can really think of to talk about. The big things are, especially on, like, trash in dungeons, knowing which target to target is very important. If there are 2 targets that are really close together, always use your Chimera Shot on those 2, because that way you'll get both of your Chimera Shots going right at it. And also making sure that you're using your Aim Shot whenever possible on a target that's above 80% health. If there's a target above 80% health, you need to be tunneling your Aim Shots into that thing. And this takes precedence over the 7 or more mobs rule. If there's a ton of mobs up, but one of them is going to live long enough for you to get an Aim Shot off on it before it falls below 80% health, do that. That will give you so much more damage than Multi-Shot will, because unfortunately Multi-Shot is kind of crap. I'm going to use it on just one Raider training dummy. Did 1,500 damage. It's nothing. So that's basically it for just DPS. There are a few more things that hunters can do. Hunters are really good at raid utility these days. We have a lot of things that we can do to just help out our group. Most notable is the return of an old friend, Aspect of the Fox. This is our big raid cooldown. Yes, I am going to talk about glyphs here in just a minute. Thank you. This is our big raid cooldown, Aspect of the Fox. Essentially, while it is active, it's a 3-minute cooldown, lasts for 6 seconds. While active, anybody in the raid can cast while moving. And this is massive. Your raid leader will probably call out when they want it. If not, ask the healers when they want it, because they are the ones that you're really going to be saving this for. During heavy damage, heavy movement fights. The perfect example, I think, is during the Quake on Twin Ogron, when all the fire starts coming out, and all the healers have to move. You want to use your Aspect of the Fox then. When they're ready, make sure they know it's ready so that they can take advantage of it. But use it then, and they'll be able to cast on the move and heal anybody that stands in the fire. Another big one is the Ice Trap. This creates a little void zone. It doesn't do any damage, but it slows any targets within it by 50%, which is really great. It's just an AoE snare, which is great for kiting ads. Hunters are the kings of kiting, because we have so many tools to just slow our opponents down. Ice Trap, Binding Shot, Disengage is a godsend for getting away from anything that's going to hit us. And if we do mess up, boom, deterrence. And we're golden. We also have concussive shot. And as an engineer, I have my rocket belt. A few other things that hunters have that a lot of people don't know about. Tranquilizing shot. You should be using this in your dungeons. I see far too many hunters who don't know how to use tranquilizing shot. Costs 20 focus, removes 1 enrage and 1 magic effect from an enemy target. It's a purge, basically, and it's great. If you are a hunter and you are going into 5-mans, please use your tranquilizing shot. Have your UI that is able to show what buffs are on your target, and if you can tranquilizing shot it off, please do so. It helps. It really does. Final thing about Marksman that I almost forgot until the chat room reminded me was going to be your talents, glyphs. Really, there aren't any mandatory glyphs for Marksmanship. It's really what you choose. The only exception there, if you are not rocking Lone Wolf, if you are going to go out there with your animal friend, you are going to want to take the glyph of Animal Bond. While your pet is active, all healing done to you and your pet is increased by 10%. This is essentially your only mandatory glyph if you are not going Lone Wolf. It's just amazingly helpful. But if you're not, then you kind of have your choice. Some of the more notable ones, Glyph of Chimera Shot. Chimera Shot now also heals you for 2% of your max health, which is very nice. Liberation. When you disengage, you're healed for 4% of your total health, which synergizes very well with the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera talent. You can disengage more often, therefore you can heal more often. Deterrence increases the damage reduction granted by deterrence by 20%. This essentially turns it into a shield wall. You deflect any direct attacks, and any AoE damage is reduced by 50%, which is incredible. Misdirection, this is one that's more for soloing. When you use Misdirection on your pet, the cooldown is reset. It's for soloing, essentially. Tranquilizing Shot can be very useful. No longer costs focus, but has a 10-second cooldown. So if you know you're going to be going in and you know you're going to be purging, you can use that, and it will be a very slight DPS increase because it won't cost you any focus. And then your minors. One that I like sometimes is the Glyph of Lesser Proportions if you are rolling with a pet, just because it makes your pet smaller and your melee aren't going to be, having to peer over your massive core hound or whatever. Play Dead. This is one of my favorite glyphs. I don't have it, but I played around with it on the beta. Your pet also plays dead when you use Feign Death. So if you're rolling with a pet and you feign death, your pet's going to play dead. And that's really fun. It's adorable to see your pet just fall over when you feign death. And it's also really good for saving a raid, or for saving yourself when you're wiping. Because if you and your pet are the last two up, you feign death, your pet feigns death, and the boss resets, and you don't have to suffer a repair bill. Which is always nice. So, I believe that's all that I have for Marksman. Are there any questions? Anyone got any questions? Alright. Well, let's move over to Survival then. Now, I'm just going to point out straight up here, Survival and Marksmanship, you can see mine are very similar. My talent builds are very similar. The only real difference with talents here is your level 60 and your level 100 talents for Survival. Your level 60 talent, the difference is that Dire Beast and Thrill of the Hunt are very, very close. Dire Beast and Thrill of the Hunt are very close in terms of DPS. If you can maximize your Thrill of the Hunt procs and make sure that you don't waste any of them, then it will be very slightly higher than Dire Beast. But Dire Beast is also just fire and forget it. I use Thrill of the Hunt just because I like it, but Dire Beast is honestly a lot easier to use. And your level 100 talent, again, Lone Wolf for single target is going to be your go-to. And your other option, if you are hitting 4 or more targets consistently, if it's going to be a mass AoE fight, exotic munitions with the incendiary ammo will afford you a DPS increase. Other than that, everything that I said for the Marksmanship when it comes to talents also applies to Survival. Now, a lot of people right now seem to be thinking that if you're not Marksmanship, you're doing it wrong. And really, until the nerfs came in, I would have agreed with them. But the nerfs brought marksmanship down to right about where survival is. The difference between them at a lower gear level in heroic mode, according to some of the WoW logs, Warcraft logs and such, it's going to be 14 positions, but it's going to be less than 1,000 DPS. So survival is very competitive right now. And honestly, I think it's a lot simpler to play. You're really going to have only a few basic abilities. Again, you're going to have your multi-shot and your explosive trap. And that's about all that's similar. One thing that you should also note is that your multi-shot as survival will apply something called Serpent Sting, and we'll get to that later. So your primary ability as a survival hunter is going to be your explosive shot. You fire an explosive charge into the enemy, it deals damage, and then it also inflicts a damage over time ability. So I'm just going to fire it on this guy. You can see it hits for 3,254 every time. 6-second cooldown, 15 focus. You want to keep it on cooldown at all times. The other ability that you want to keep on cooldown at all times is your Black Arrow. 35 focus, 24-second cooldown. It's another damage over time ability. But the damage isn't what's important. The damage is nice, but that's not what you're really looking for. What you're looking for is the proc. It has the ability to trigger lock and load. What is lock and load? Lock and load causes your next two explosive shots to cost no focus and trigger no cooldown. This is amazing, because not only does it do that, but it also instantly resets the cooldown of your explosive shot. So I'm just going to fire a Black Arrow on this training dummy. And then I'm going to hit my explosive shot. And you can see, it's just ticking away, doing its thing. There we go. Lock and load. And it instantly reset. And I can just fire them away. And then after your two free explosive shots, you still have another one that will cost you the 15 focus. But it's still going. It's still good. So Black Arrow, very important ability to use. Now your other two abilities, whereas your fillers with Marksmanship were Steady Shot and Aimed Shot, with Survival it's going to be Cobra Shot and Arcane Shot. The difference being, Cobra Shot deals, it deals nature damage rather than physical damage. So it's not going to be affected by armor, which is very nice. But it also generates the same amount of focus. It has the same cast time. The difference is physical versus nature damage. And then the Arcane Shot. It costs 30 focus. It's instant. And it causes arcane damage. Again, magical damage. Marksmanship is very much about physical damage, whereas Survival is very much about magical damage. Magical damage. Which, again, it's not affected by armor, which is a very nice plus. So, I mentioned earlier that multi-shot applies Serpent Sting. Arcane Shot also applies Serpent Sting. What is Serpent Sting? Let's find it here. Serpent Sting. Targets hit by a multi-shot and Arcane Shot are also afflicted by Serpent Sting, dealing blah 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 nature damage over 15 seconds. Mine says 12,318. So it's essentially a dot, a nature damage dot that is placed on your target. I'm going to fire. There we go. You can see it has the Serpent Sting on it. Now, a lot of your skill as survival, had a brain fart there. A lot of your skill as survival is going to be how much uptime on Serpent Sting can you keep, while also keeping your other abilities on cooldown. And we'll get to all that in just a minute. Right now, I'm going to talk about our rotation, your rotation. On a single target, you are going to have, first of all, your most important ability to keep on cooldown at all times is Black Arrow. Black Arrow is your number one priority shot, because it does generate those lock and load procs, and it also does a significant chunk of damage. I mean, like you can see, mine was hitting for, 8,000? Critting for 8,000? That's a nice chunk of damage right there. Now, after that, it's going to be your explosive shot. You want to keep that on cooldown at all times. Again, now, this is going to be a little more tricky because of the lock and load thing, and we'll get to handling that here in just a little bit. After your Black Arrow and after your explosive shot, it's going to be the same as with your Marksmanship. It's going to be your Glaive Toss, your Barrage, and then it's going to be your Murder Crows or your Stampede, and then alternating your filler spells. And that's your basic rotation for single target. For cleave, it's going to be essentially the same thing, only you're going to want to alternate which target you're hitting Arcane Shot on so that you can keep up the Serpent Sting damage. You can keep up the Serpent Sting buff on more than one target without using multi-shot, just by swapping which one you use Arcane Shot on. So just keeping that buff, that debuff up, will nicely increase your cleave damage. It's not going to increase it by a lot, but it's going to be something. Now once you hit 4 or more targets, and with cleave, 2 or more targets, you're also going to be throwing in your explosive trap, as with marksmanship. With AoE, the difference in your rotation is going to be come in at 4 or more targets. At that point, you are going to replace your arcane shot with your multi-shot. Your multi-shot is going to do more damage, but more importantly, it's going to spread that Serpent Sting around. A lot of your AoE damage will not come from your multi-shot, it's going to come from your Serpent Sting. And multi-shot just helps you keep that Serpent Sting up a lot more. But you're still going to be following that single target rotation. Your Black Arrow, your Explosive Shot, all of that stuff. Now once you hit 7 or more targets, this is when we go into mass AoE mode. At this point, you are going to stop using Explosive Shot on cooldown. Instead, your rotation is going to consist of Black Arrow on cooldown, your Glaive Toss or your Barrage, hopefully Barrage, since if it's going to be mass AoE, then Barrage is going to do a ton more damage than Glaive Toss. And then your Multi-Shot. And you will only ever touch Explosive Shot if you get the Lock and Load procs. If you get the focus-free Lock and Load procs. Other than that, it's just going to be basically spamming Multi-Shot and Barrage and Cobra Shot. And that's going to be for 7 or more targets. And again, for anything more than 2 targets, you're also going to be throwing your Explosive Trap in there. So, what haven't we talked about yet? Gear. Gearing. Gearing is important, yes. So, again, same thing applies as with marksmanship. You want the most weapon damage that you can have on your ranged weapon. You also want to have as much agility as you can get. Now after that, things change a little bit. Instead of going for a critical strike, survival focuses more instead on multi-strike. That's because of this passive right here, Survivalist. Increases the damage of your multi-strikes by 20%. So that's something really good right there. But there is also, I believe, somewhere in here, I know it's in here. There we go. Lightning Reflexes. You gain 5% more of the multi-strike stat from all sources. So not only are you getting more multi-strike for your buck, your multi-strikes are also doing 20% more damage. So that pushes it above Critical Strike. Now your next highest is going to be Critical Strike. So far we have weapon damage, agility, multi-strike, critical strike. After that, it's going to be mastery. Your mastery. What is our mastery? Our mastery is Essence of the Viper. Increases all magical damage you deal by blah 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 %. Mine says 10. That's just because of how much mastery I have. So, it's just a flat increase to your all of your magical damage. That is going to be everything except Glaive Toss or Barrage, Stampede or Murder of Crows, the physical damage portion of your multi-shot, and your auto shot. So Mastery is not a bad stat. It's not as good as Critical Strike or Multi-Strike, but it is a decent stat. And after that, it's going to be Versatility and Haste are right about the same again. I personally prefer Haste for just flat-out damage, because it reduces the channel time of my Barrage, it reduces the cast time of my Cobra Shot, but Versatility also has the added bonus of reducing the damage that you take. So, whichever one you need more of. If you're taking too much damage, go for Versatility. If you're not, maybe go for Haste. It really doesn't matter. So that's the stats. And for gemming and enchanting, again, kind of like with marksmanship, you're going to gem and enchant into your best stat, which for us is multi-strike. Now, all my gear has critical strike because I mostly play marksmanship. But if I were to play a lot of survival, I would instead be gemmed and enchanted into multi-strike. Now, the key to mastering your survival hunter is managing your cooldowns. The little cooldowns that you have. one thing to note about survival is that our rotation is the exact same from the moment we pull a boss to the moment it ends. We have no executability, and we have no cooldowns except for Stampede if you take it, which it's a bit odd, but we work with it, adapt and overcome. So, the big thing to worry about is making sure that your black arrow and your explosive shot are on cooldown at all times. You want to make sure that as soon as they come up, you have the focus to fire them off again, because any instant that they are off cooldown is a damage loss. Making sure that your explosive shot and your black arrow are on cooldown at all times is the most important thing that you will be doing as part of your rotation. Now, this becomes a little more tricky with the lock and load thing, because that'll fire off at any time. It could fire off the instant that you start channeling your barrage. If it does, finish your channel and then go straight into your explosive shots. If your lock and load procs, just fire it off one after the other. In the past, you had to do some dot clipping and arcane shot weaving and all other kinds of nonsense. These days, you can just fire them off one right after the other, no delay, no filling in with other shots, just explosive, just keep firing them off. But yeah, and the other big thing is just keeping your Serpent Sting buff up. This just means that every 12 seconds or so, you should fire in an arcane shot. It shouldn't be too difficult considering the low focus cost of our other big abilities, our explosive shot and our black arrow. But if you're doing something really crazy, it might fall off. It's not too big of a deal, but you do want to make sure that it is up as much as possible, because that's just free damage. And then, glyphs. Again, same thing as with Marksmanship. The glyphs are essentially the same. These are a little bit different because these are the same glyphs that I had from my days in Mists of Pandaria when I ran around soloing, mostly, on my Survival Hunter. But the glyphs are basically the same. Animal Bond if you have a pet out, and then one of those other glyphs, Deterrence or, Liberation, something like that, Tranquilizing Shot. Glyphs really don't matter too much for a hunter in Warlords of Draenor. They really don't. So, I think that's about it. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone in the Mumble channel? Anyone in the chat room? Alright, well, I guess that's a no. So, thank you all for coming to the Hunter boot camp. I hope this has been helpful. Hope you were able to learn a little something. Maybe help you get a bit better on your Hunter. And thank you for coming. Take it easy.